Hand you over to Charlotte Carpenter. Kerry, if you could share the slides. Thank you.
Thanks, Tori. Kerry, you're right showing the slides. Hopefully they'll come up soon.
Yeah, I'm just on it. Hang on.
Oh, thanks, Kerry. Okay, so I'll start because I've realised that I've crammed quite a lot of detail into this presentation. Hopefully we'll get through it in the time frame. So I'm planning to give you a perspective of research through the lens of a clinician. I'm an occupational therapist and have worked in forensic mental health since 2002. Back in 2015, 2016, I completed a master's here at Oxford Brookes University and conducted a qualitative research study for my dissertation. Since around early 2016, is it coming up? I was leading an occupational. Sorry, Kerry?
Just got the wrong presentation up. Hold on a second.
All right, no worries. I'll do the intro anyway, and then when that comes out, that's no bother. Yeah, so from early 2016, I was leading occupational therapists in a high secure service implementing VDT Mocha and established a service evaluation project to measure the effectiveness of this. And although I changed roles in April 2019 to physical health AHP team manager, I'm still involved in completing this service evaluation. And we're currently writing this up for publication, hopefully in the British Journal of OT. So in this presentation, I intend to give you an overview of my research experience and the service evaluation in a high secure environment. We'll just kind of wait and see whether the presentation is going to come up. Sorry, I had issues with sharing my PowerPoint for some reason this morning.
There we go. That should be it now.
Thanks, Kerry. Okay, so that's the front page. Can we have the next slide, please, Kerry? So I just want to start by saying that I completed my first 2 years of my master's being absolutely can we get the previous one? That's lovely, thank you. Absolutely petrified of my dissertation and the likelihood of conducting a research study. If anyone would have told me 6 years ago I'd have completed 2 studies by now, I would have fallen on the floor laughing at them and probably told them to get lost. I want to show you that despite these reactions, doing research is possible as a clinician and is incredibly powerful and rewarding. So I'm going to outline the 2 very different studies I've conducted and how I went about doing them and what they demonstrated. Next slide. Lovely. So my journey started with discovering VDT Mocha, and it completely transformed my own and our team's practice along with our clinical reasoning and professional confidence. I focused largely on VDT Mocha during my MSc programme, and this made me aware of VDT Mocha needing an evidence base in the UK. I also felt that forensic OT evidence base needed updating too, with RCOT guidelines mostly being MOHO based, which I struggle to use effectively within high security. At that point, I was also getting involved with the VDT Mocha UK Foundation running today's event as research officer for the period of 2015 to 2017 too. And this motivated me to even further to conduct a study for my dissertation. Gaining support from others here was key, as others have outlined in previous presentations as well. And Dr. Wendy Sherwood was incredible. She supported me at looking at what I could do at a master's level and thinking about what Karen was saying about earlier this morning. You can do it simply, and it's about making it simple so it's achievable. And Wendy really helped me to work out what would be meaningful, what I could do, and what would also be a meaningful contribution to the VDT Mocha evidence base. But I also wanted it to be of interest to me as well, given that I was going to spend a year of my life focusing on it. Next slide. So with Wendy's support, I identified what to investigate as an MSc project. My research question was, what are occupational therapists' experiences of using the Vondertoy model of creative ability, creative participation assessment in forensic mental health settings in the UK? For those of you who aren't familiar with the tool, on this slide, there's just a picture of the top part of it, just in case you've seen it, but whether that aids your memory. And this is the model's main assessment stroke outcome measure. Next slide. Thank you. And I really wanted to keep this study as simple and achievable as possible. So I specifically focused on interviewing staff, as this meant I only needed university ethical approval. I personally felt more comfortable with qualitative approaches as opposed to statistics, so opted for a qualitative descriptive study design based on constructivist inquiry. I used purposive sampling via VDT Mocha Foundation, and they emailed a contact list of those trained in the model to promote my study to intentionally recruit OTs using the VDT Mocha in forensic environments. I gained a sample of 8 OTs, where I was aiming for 6 to 10, so 8 was pretty much bang on what I hoped to get. And these were from across medium and low secure settings. For ethical reasons, because I was leading the only team in high security using the model, the team that I was working with were excluded, unfortunately. So it did mean that we could only focus on medium and low secure at that time. Next slide. Thank you. I used semi-structured interviews over a web-based call platform with recording function, but kept thorough notes in case of a technical error, which I was pretty much petrified of. This offered flexibility of timings and negated the need for myself and participants to travel, so it was quite ideal. The interviews were transcribed verbatim, which took an extremely long time, but it really did help with immersing myself in the data analysis from the start. Thematic analysis was used to analyse the whole data set, and Dr. Wendy Sherwood supported my analysis by independently analysing the data set so that we could compare and contrast themes we both independently elicited, which was then offered researcher triangulation. And once I established a thematic network, she also cross-referenced this again with the raw data to ensure that all themes were captured, offering peer scrutiny. The thematic network, which was pretty much just a flowchart of the themes and the interlinkings of the sub-themes, was then sent to all participants to check that it effectively represented their experiences, which is known as member checking. And what I'll do now is I'll summarise my findings under these headings to give you a flavour of what kind of things came out of the study. So theme 1 was developing an understanding of the patient. So this is all about the VDT Mocha CP, the Creative Participation Assessment Tool. So theme 1 was developing an understanding of the patient. In terms of information gathering, the tool was found to be effective for consolidating various types of information. It was versatile, unique, easy and quick to use. Timings wise, OTs reported it fitted forensic practice and associated timescales well. It was typically completed in the first 2 weeks of admission, but was also used to measure effectiveness of specific treatment groups. Whilst also useful for assessing performance within single task assessments, it was also equally valued for multiple observations. Next slide, Gary, thank you. Theme 2 was assessing the patient. So I must say that the bold sub-themes are also the sub-themes that came out of the study under these broader theme headings. So theme 1 was assessing the patient. In terms of the forensic patient group, they were described as having complex personalities and dynamics between them. They were institutionalized, had lengthy admissions generally, and a tendency to portray themselves as capable, with kind of low and variable levels of motivation, which I'm sure a lot of forensic OTs on this session will relate to. In terms of features of the forensic environment, the environment has highly structured routines. It offers a level of containment and consistent influence in terms of consistent boundary setting and care plans. And although there are environmental restrictions, there is a level of personalised risk assessment. The unfamiliar tasks were seen as incredibly important. They offered OTs an opportunity to get an accurate picture of patients' abilities, but they did require imagination and awareness of familiarity of tasks to individuals, along with complex, which sometimes really did test OTs' abilities. The next slide. So theme 3 was about the importance of seeing the patient engaged in activity. And this enabled, through use of the assessment tool, it enabled the identification of abilities and treatment needs. It was described as offering a granular assessment leading to truly occupation-focused intervention. And the CPA form was described as an accurate, sensitive and robust tool for use with forensic patients, which is, in my experience, quite unusual. And it aided the analysis of skills and deficits, enabling OTs to identify which have the greatest impact on performance, both in a strength side and a deficit side. The tool was seen as crucial to enabling OTs' clinical reasoning. OTs felt more able to justify skills they assess and aim to develop with patients, and aided their prioritisation of interventions, especially with those with personality disorder. Thanks, Kerry. Theme 4 was making sense of the VDT MOCA CPA outcomes. In terms of treatment planning, it enabled patients to be supported in environments and situations they struggle with. In this way, it identified where patients needed one-to-one support, whether they needed one-to-one support within groups, or if they could actually just tolerate groups on their own. And it was felt to help predict readiness for freedoms, i.e. Section 17 leave, being a rep for a meeting, or being moved to a less secure ward. OTs felt that it helped them to clearly define and deliver the OT role due to its strong occupational focus. It enabled careful grading of occupations, meaning even high-risk patients were able to engage. And it also encouraged consistent service delivery, and OTs described feeling more proficient in explaining the rationale for interventions and also measuring effectiveness. Theme 5 was about communication. This was quite a big one. So the structured, consistent VDT MOCA assessments were felt to lead to organised, boundaried OT treatment with facilitating effective communication between OTs. And a lot of OTs said it was really helpful when patients transferred between wards or whether they were picking up working alongside a patient, that the tool, a completed CPA form, would visually communicate patients' strengths and needs really, really quickly. You could clap eyes on it and sort of think, if I'm going to be working alongside them, they're going to have issues in this area, or let's play to their strengths, which are in these areas. Similarly, it was felt to enhance communication with the MDT. It enabled OTs to communicate patients' abilities or deficits underpinning problematic behaviours on wards and units, and it ensured that expectations were realistic to then prevent setbacks. The tool was felt to be a bit too complicated to show and go through the patient, but goals and skills of the levels were easy to explain. And some was quite concerned that visually it might show patients, so say they're a self-presentation level, that's quite far to the left, the lower side, and so it might actually have an impact on their confidence if they saw they were low in ability. But then in the same way, you could also show a before and after rating and show that to visually demonstrate the progress they've made. In this respect, the APOM, the Activity Participation Outcome Measure, which I'll show you a picture of later, was seen as complementary to the tool here, with its spider graph being more useful to show to patients. So theme 6 was about the learning of the model. So having a good understanding, and also the tool within the current healthcare climate, and bearing in mind this was 2015, 2016. So having a good understanding of VDT MOCA was vital for developing familiarity with the tool, and ring fencing time by services was seen as essential. Regular tool use was really beneficial here. So regularly using it and analysing the patient's occupational performance. There was an absolutely insurmountable value of VDT MOCA, the CPA form and APOM versus MOHO and its associated tools. However, in terms of the tool's terminology, some concepts were felt to need clearer definition and were a little bit confusing to some people when they first started learning the tool and the model. There were also disparities between the CPA tool, the handling principles and treatment aims booklet, and that sometimes confused OTs in practice. So they did feel that there needed to be more information there. Structure-wise, they described it as sometimes difficult to distinguish phases with minimal space for context around the form, and that there were small amendments that they all kind of suggested which might make the tool more user-friendly. The pressures impacting on the use of the model. I suppose the main thing is that the VDT mocker is not taught nationally on undergraduate training. And then along with high staff turnover, services described that they were constantly getting people trained, getting them kind of confident with using the tool, and then they would leave. And there was just this constant battle to secure funding to kind of keep their workforce trained in the model, which is quite tough. And as a consequence, it is quite a slow journey to embed, with networking being absolutely essential. So undoubtedly, the biggest payoff of doing this research study was the rich, motivating and really compelling detail I gained, which I could then take into my workplace, where I was leading a team of OTs in high security in implementing the model. And it was a really positive experience. It was such a positive experience that I felt confident to then think about what we could do in the workplace. So we decided that in the current climate, we really needed to be able to justify our transition to a new model of practice, especially if it appeared more costly to other disciplines. So we decided that we would conduct a service evaluation, and this was approved by the Trust Audit Committee. So going back to Karen's presentation again, the data was deemed to be collected routine within the department. So it was quite helpful that we just went through the audit committee and had approval that way, as opposed to having to go through the full ethical research kind of application. But we were literally just measuring OT session attendance data and outcome measure data, which we were ordinarily collecting as a department. So the department at this point was facilitating VDT mocker based occupational therapy interventions to patients across 9 wards. So this was only one, this was 2/3 of the hospital, because we used to be split into 2 departments. And the interventions were based on their level of creative ability and specific treatment needs. So we decided that we would use the activity participation outcome measure, the APOM, which you can see here as the spider graph output from a APOM. And it's a VDT mocker based outcome measure, which measures change in patients' occupational performance, and quite uniquely, it is incredibly sensitive. So it's got 53 items rated on a scale of 1 to 18 across 8 occupational performance domains. Each spindle of that spider graph gives you a number, which is the average of all of the components within that section, within that domain. And the spider graph really helpfully summarizes abilities, needs, and change over time. So this example patient here had 4 APOMs completed in his time in high security. And so as you can see, I remember sitting down with this patient, and when he was about to be discharged in medium security, showing him the incredible progress that he had made from that inner circle all the way to that kind of green spider graph at the end, which was really positive. But our intention was that the APOM would be used with all patients in the pathway and repeated at 6 monthly intervals, consistent with when OTs would be completing the patient's care program approach, another CPA acronym, unfortunately, when they were doing their CPA reports. And between time points, each patient would receive VDT mocker informed treatment based on the outcomes of their initial assessment or their previous APOM. Next slide. Thanks, Kerry. So we had a clear, consistent VDT mocker based OT program in situ for 9 wards. On admission, patients would have a full VDT mocker assessment, and a baseline APOM would be completed prior to their first CPA at 3 months. A VDT mocker treatment plan would be delivered based on the outcomes, and the APOM would be repeated at their next CPA at 6 months. Oh God, sorry, just realised those arrows are all over the place. So the APOM would be then repeated every 6 months, and again, the treatment plan would be tailored again to those outcomes, aiding progression. APOM outcomes were also, so this is the important bit, the outcomes of all the APOMs were also used in our programme review meetings to ensure that we were constantly delivering treatments which were responsive to the current needs of the patients in our service, because otherwise, if you're just repeating the same thing, it's never going to help them to progress. We devised a simple Excel spreadsheet detailing patient demographics, the baseline average APOM scores for each domain and overall average, a tally of sessions that each patient attended for each occupational performance area between admission and the last CPA or APOM. We then did the same for the interim average APOM scores and a tally again of how many sessions since the previous APOM they've attended in each of the occupational performance areas. So it was quite straightforward. The other thing that I will sort of labour is it's little strategies that really make the difference. So what we did is every electronic patient note entry made by an OT, at the top of the title they would put which occupational performance area they were treating, so that OTs could literally just go through and tally how many, say, workability sessions a patient's attended or social ability, and it made a huge difference. So the design was a repeated measures design. So we were looking at changes in APOM scores compared at baseline and interim 1, with attendance at VT mock sessions between time points also recorded and compared. For example, our aim was to establish whether increased attendance to social ability sessions improved communication, or did increased attendance to workability sessions improve their process skills. So that's just generally what we were looking at. The sample consisted of 70 adult male patients in high security. Approximately 80% had a diagnosis of schizophrenia, and data was collected over a time period of 2016 to 2020. The data analysis, as I said before, my strong point is not quantitative. I tend to lean towards qualitative methods, but obviously we needed quantitative for this type of study. So we have a doctoral researcher from Brunel University who's on an honorary contract with the trust, and he, Luke Aldridge-Wadden, he's been an absolute godsend. He did all of the statistical analysis using SPSS. We literally just sent him the database and he extrapolated the data and conducted these studies, these tests. I don't know really what they did, but they conducted the Wilcoxon signed rank test, they did the Cohen's D effect sizes test, and the Kruskal-Wallis tests. And it was really vital to engage with the hospital's research and development team at this point, because it is really difficult to know all of this and be a clinician at the same time. So I would advise anybody doing any of this to seek support from your research and development team, but also local universities, as previous presenters have said about. So Luke very helpfully helped us work out what the scores meant when he sent us a list of lots of numbers, which didn't really mean much to us OTs in the department. So as you can see, in terms of our results, the bar chart here shows the mean baseline scores at baseline, which are black, and interim at grey. And even us non-statisticians can see quite a dramatic difference between the two. And we were ecstatic at this. We did not expect this level of change. And I don't think actually Luke and his supervisor Ignacio did either. So we were quite overwhelmed when they sort of came to us pretty much jumping up and down with these results. So in summary, all APOM domains scores were significantly, so statistically significantly different between baseline and interim 1. The greatest impact was on communication, i.e. the difference between scores. So you can see the biggest gap there on that second bar chart. And process skills were significantly higher at interim compared to at baseline. Also, they looked at attendance levels as well. And again, it was the VDT mock-based approach was also found to significantly attract and improve patients' attendance to sessions. In terms of outcomes or other outcomes, the greatest change was detected in patients in intensive care and admissions wards, with significant differences in APOM scores between admissions and assertive rehab wards too. So showing that progression, but also that they're moving in the right direction in their pathway as well. OTs reported a much wider range of patients engaging, particularly within the VDT Mocker informed OT program versus when previously based on MOHO. Worryingly, some patients hadn't engaged for almost 18 months with OT, so we were now able to work with a far less population than previously. There was a strong correlation as well between increased attendance to a VDT Mocker informed OT treatment program and increased occupational performance outcomes as detected by the APOM. And this indicates that implementing VDT Mocker within the service successfully improved the occupational well-being of service users and confirms the APOM as a sufficiently sensitive tool for detecting change in high secure forensic UK population. Didn't think that sentence through, that was a bit of a mouthful. And the next slide. Thank you. So now we are planning to write up the service evaluation for publication in the British Journal of OT. This is alongside all of our day jobs, so that is proving quite a slow burn at the moment, but it feels incredibly worthwhile. Our results will also be sent to Professor Deline Castellane, who's the author of the APOM, and she'll be including our data in a multi-site project to establish validity and reliability of the APOM with a UK forensic population in low, medium and high security. The High Secure Service are continuing to collect data to measure effectiveness routinely, which is fantastic. It's great that the OTs all see it as, and this was a huge team approach as well and team effort, but they all want to carry on doing it because they're all excited about knowing whether what they're doing is as effective as it had been. You know, we can compare the effect sizes and see whether if there's a big turnover in staff, whether the effect size changes and things like this. So it's really, really helpful. On top of that as well, the team have also detailed their VDT mocker journey and study within the High Secure chapter of a book on the model, which is due out in January 2021. It's been edited by Wendy Sherwood, and it's perspectives on the VDT mocker practice, theory and philosophy. So that's really great that we can write to support other departments and other hospitals in implementing the VDT mocker. I'm also still planning to write up my MSc study for publication in BJOT, and that's been on my PDR for about 4 years. But I think once I've done the service evaluation one in BJOT, I'll feel more confident to then approach doing my own or my own study myself. So my advice to you is give it a go. You can keep it simple but meaningful, which I hope I've portrayed in the example of my own study. But form a core team. Don't try and do it all on your own. Whether you're doing an MSc or PhD, you'll have university lecturers around you. If you're just in a department that wants to do it, form a core team, share the weight, you'll bounce ideas off each other. This was a team, the service evaluation was a team of probably 13 OTs over the time period where 7 people kind of left the team, Tori being one of them. Tori was instrumental in a massive part of this service evaluation and the delivery of the treatments. But it's really important, and it's such an amazing team building exercise to do this. So also make and use key contacts for support. Use your R&D team, use your universities, use peers, use those with research or subject experience. And the biggest thing is you can never guess the payoffs. So that's about it.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Charlotte. Just reading some of the comments in the chat, there's some really good feedback there. I think you've been quite inspirational in terms of people looking at generating their own evidence for the positive impact of using the model in practice. So there's one question there within the chat box. Just keep submitting them if there's anything else that anyone else wants to ask. There's one question here from Corinne Dawes, who's asked, how easy did you find it to identify the emerging themes?
I actually found it really difficult. I remember just constantly, you can find themes, but I think without the support of Wendy, it's hard to see beyond what's really visible right in front of you and to try and encapsulate them in a different way. So I think in that respect, having someone that's conducted similar research before is a huge help, and to engage with them as soon as possible. Because I think I spent quite a long time. I remember my husband was away with work, and I thought, right, I'm going to go away, get a change of scenery, and just live in a hotel room for a week and really kind of immerse myself in it. And after about the 3rd day, I was just like, I can't see the wood for the trees. You know, I've just kind of, your head's just spinning with it. So I really do think it's good to kind of get someone else to come and meet with you and go through it together, because then you bounce ideas off each other and then elicit themes and condense them as well. So that was probably the hardest bit of my MSc dissertation, I think.
Fab. And there's one more question from Sarah Byrne, who is an occupational therapist in High Secure. She's wondering about the tools that could be used with new admission patients in terms of risk. So I think it's more a question around the actual application of the model of creative ability rather than from a research perspective. But from your experience, Charlotte, is there anything you can share in terms of that? Because you were on an admission ward, weren't you, in High Secure?
Yeah, and I think a lot of that, we found the CPA form really helpful. And what we could do is when we assessed somebody using it, you could almost star which of the occupational performance items related to risk the most. So if it was relating to people, if they were constantly saying antagonistic things, we would put an asterisk next to it and go, oh, this is something to watch out for. So I would use that, but also I think it would help you if somebody's extremely self-differentiation, say, level. I would probably try and do individual sessions for a long time before then you would step into groups. So it's kind of how you use the tool. I'm not sure whether that quite answers it. But I would almost use the VDT Mocha CPA tool to unpick, well, which occupational performance issues relate to risk the most, whether it's emotion regulation, whether it's other people that set them off, or whether it's interpersonal skills.
Fab. Thank you so much for that, Charlotte, and thank you for that really, really informative and inspirational presentation.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Right, so we've got the next presentation is with Sophie Faulkner. She is a specialist research occupational therapist at Greater Manchester Mental Health